You want to hear like a really weird story?
Always.
Okay.
Like, I knew the moment I was having a girl, she was gonna be a dancer, and she was gonna wear bows and tutus, and she was gonna like it.
Have you ever thought of quitting dance? Actually, yes.
I just wanted it so bad for her, and she wanted it too.
She doesn't even mention missing out on her marriage to Tom.
There wasn't going to be as much time for me to spend with JoJo because I had to spend it with, get to spend it, I should definitely say, with everyone else.
I kept thinking, what am I doing to this little girl? Like, I didn't really even ask her, but she loved it.
Hey guys, so full disclosure, this video was intended to be about JoJo Siwa, but I started realizing if I'm gonna understand JoJo Siwa, I should probably try to understand her mom a little bit more first, because they're kind of like two peas in a pod. They really come together. And the more I started trying to understand her mom in order to understand JoJo, I was like, her mom needs an entire video to herself because she is a fascinating character. So let's get into this. Sometimes to understand why someone behaves a certain way, it's important to look into their parents' growing up experience, who their parents are now, who their parents were as kids. And I think the same is true for JoJo. So while I wasn't able to find a ton of information about her mom's growing up history, I was able to find that she was born December 8th, 1974. So she was originally from Iowa. Her mom was a hairstylist and her dad worked in waste management. And at some point they owned a 7-Eleven, to my understanding. And she had a dance school that she went to behind the 7-Eleven, but would also help her parents at the 7-Eleven. To be honest, I'm not sure what this quote means, but I read online that she is descended from dance enthusiasts. So whatever that means, she's descended from dance enthusiasts. She did face some really hard things throughout her life. Her parents got divorced at some point.
My dad divorced my mom, okay? I took my mom's side. My dad was not my favorite person in the world, okay?
Her brother also passed away in a car accident when he was 16.
Okay, so I have a brother actually. And he actually died in a car accident when he was 16, and his name is Jaden.
And she moved to Nebraska in 5th grade. So I'm not sure if any of these situations played into her moving to Nebraska. All I know is that she made it to Nebraska.
You know, 17-year-old Jess only loved to dance. Like, I wanted to move to California. I wanted to be a professional dancer. Could you imagine this girl from Nebraska? Like, I want to be a professional dancer. The agents would be like, no.
And as she was turning into an adult, she decided to start her own dance studio and ended up meeting her husband through one of the students' parents at the dance studio. It was an interesting situation.
And that night, I said to her daughter, don't leave my side the whole night. Just hang out with me, right? Because I was so nervous. I had to like meet this chiropractor. And I literally had her little girl and her little friends were like walking around with me. And
odd choice to be led around by your students and her friends as your chaperones, but you know, maybe it just explains a lot about JoJo's situation now. So I'm extrapolating and hypothesizing a bit here, but I wouldn't be surprised if around the time that she met her husband and they started planning a family, she might have been feeling a bit insecure about herself as a sort of former dancer. She probably was no longer in the maybe glory days of her career.
In an article about athletic identity, it states that athletic identity is the degree to which an individual identifies with the athlete role and looks to others for acknowledgement of that role. It is a type of self-schema, or how an individual perceives themselves. It provides a framework for interpreting information, determines how an athlete copes with career-threatening situations, and inspires behavior consistent with the athlete role. It can define the way in which an individual evaluates their competence or worth. The amount of worth and competence an individual places on self-concept may influence their self-esteem, affect, and motivation. So I wouldn't be surprised if Jessalyn had really wrapped herself into her athletic identity as a dancer, but it was slowly starting to unravel by the time she was going to soon be pregnant with JoJo.
And so the idea of having a daughter who could carry on that dream was probably seeming really enticing. Enter JoJo Siwa.
Like, I knew the moment I was having a girl, she was gonna be a dancer, and she was gonna wear bows and tutus, and she was gonna like it. She did her first solo at the age of 2.
JoJo was a top 5 finalist and youngest contestant on Abby's Ultimate Dance Competition. She later became a regular fixture on Dance Moms and then was signed to Nickelodeon in 2017. And I completely forgot to mention, which is probably the story of his life, Jessalyn had a son before JoJo. His name is Jordan, and Jordan is named after Jessalyn's past brother. So that's just kind of a rundown of the lore of Jessalyn and JoJo. Now I want to kind of dive into it a little bit more. So as we can see, Jessalyn went through a lot. She went through a lot of ups and downs. And I think honestly, my supposition is that this really led to her feeling kind of invisible growing up. That's probably why she really dove headlong into dance. And I think as she became an adult, she really pursued 3 things to keep herself from becoming invisible. One was obviously dance, the next was makeup, and then loudness. I really get the sense that there's probably part of her that wish she had had more success than she did growing up. And so with JoJo could become the epitome of that success that she'd always wanted.
If your kid is the next big thing, call 1-800-MY-KID's-A-STAR. Well, guess what I did? You called? I called. No, I put JoJo in dance because I was a dance teacher hoping, praying she would love it, and she did. She didn't love it as much as probably I loved it. She just, wanted to play with her friends. And
The first thing was called Abby's Ultimate Dance Competition.
Talk to me about that.
And I didn't even ask JoJo. I just sent in an audition tape, and I kept thinking, what am I doing to this little girl? Like, I didn't really even ask her, but she loved it.
Have you ever thought of quitting dance? Actually, yes. When I was little, I was always like, I want to do softball. I want to do basketball.
I just wanted it so bad for her, and she wanted it too. Sometimes when I'm having a bad day and I have to go out and I don't think my hair is looking very good or something like that, I'm like, nobody's worrying about me. Everyone's worrying about themselves. So that's a little kind of tidbit that gets me through.
So to each their own with wearing makeup. I don't want to judge anyone for whatever kind of style they like to wear. Do what makes you happy. Represent who you are with makeup. All well and good. My honest opinion when I see JoJo's mother's form of makeup is I immediately see her eyes and her bright lips. It's just very striking. And I would imagine that some of this is a conscious choice. Some of it is probably a bit subconscious. And I'm guessing, having never been in the serious dance world in my own personal life, I'm guessing that's probably a big part of the dance world, just being very done up, kind of over the top in a way.
There have been some studies done on the wearing of makeup and people's perception of makeup. One of the studies said they found that men and women agree on the amount of cosmetics they find attractive, but overestimate the preferences of women, and when considering the preferences of men, overestimate even more. We also find that models' self-applied cosmetics are far in excess of individual preferences. These findings suggest that attractiveness perceptions with cosmetics are a form of pluralistic ignorance, whereby women tailor their cosmetics to use an inaccurate perception of others' preferences. These findings also highlight further miscalibrations of attractiveness ideals. Another study found men and women both rated the faces with cosmetics added as higher in attractiveness. However, only women rated faces with cosmetics as higher in dominance, while only men rated them as higher in prestige. We found that women experience more jealousy toward women with cosmetics and view these women as more attractive to men and more promiscuous.
I think in an effort to really try to prove herself, she likely consciously and subconsciously threw on some very notable makeup to feel obviously more attractive to herself, but probably there's a part of her that wanted to be attractive to the men around, not necessarily trying to say anything negative about her character, but just wanting to have that boost in confidence. And then I think it's really interesting with the articles how women see it as a little bit more of a dominance move, and women can be jealous of other women wearing makeup. I wouldn't be shocked if she was trying to have a little bit of a power play with the amount of makeup that she was wearing. A lot of times men and women don't really understand each other's mindsets, I think, in it. And women, it sounds like, tend to wear more than they would prefer, and actually more than men or maybe even other women think is necessary. So there's probably just a learning curve there. But I think especially with this dance realm, I would expect that there is a bit of a conscious and subconscious power play going on as well. So for anyone who's familiar with Dance Moms, which I really was not until now, I think JoJo and her mom really kind of made history in the show for being a very loud duo.
A website called A Conscious Rethink listed reasons people might be loud, and their reasons are they're overcompensating for shyness, they might want to feel more important, they're trying to prove something, they've never had a voice before, which I think is very apt for JoJo Siwa's mom's interpretation of her own growing up experience. It's down to their biology, it's how they were raised, they're selfish and egocentric, they could be anxious, which I think is also very valid, they have control issues, which happens if you feel anxious.
I am the crazy mom, and I have to just take ownership of that. The crazier the mom, the better the kid's gonna be. So I, of course, being Jess, went up to school and gave the principal a very big piece of my mind.
They were very opinionated, had no fear sharing their opinions, and that's really been a huge part of Jessalynn's teaching for her kids and her own conviction, is to just really speak up for yourself whenever you're convinced of something and stand up for yourself even if no one else sees the vision. If you see it and you're confident in it, go with it.
And Abby one time, she told JoJo, she said, tomorrow you are not wearing a bow, JoJo, because you stand out. And I think that's why I have to give you so many corrections, is because of your bow. I said to JoJo, I said, so maybe tomorrow, we should just wear your hair in a bun or like something and not wear a bow. And she said, Mom, I'm wearing 2 bows tomorrow. I was like, perfection, just do your thing, JoJo.
Our goal was to get on Abby's team and be a part of what Abby's doing. It was also about not compromising who JoJo is and who I am. JoJo is who JoJo is, and I think like my mouth.
I honestly just feel that a lot of the loudness that has gone on between the two of them is rooted in feeling like they have to be loud to be seen. And I'm sure there is certainly a biological element to their vocal cords, but I really do believe for Jess and JoJo, there's a lot of subconscious need for control and being seen and being on top and succeeding. Jess's podcast is Success with Jess. Her mantra is, how do I find success? So the really interesting thing in all of this, and I'm sure it's not surprising, but it's just sad to see, is I really feel like Jess has used JoJo's legacy, if you will, to become her own. And she really sees JoJo's successes and failures as her own successes and failures. There were clips where if she was mentioning JoJo making mistakes, she'd say it was embarrassing. And there's a difference between having empathetic embarrassment for your child. If you know they're embarrassed and you are embarrassed for their sake, that's one thing. But when your child does something that's embarrassing and you're like, I am embarrassed, and it's a performance thing. It's not like they're misbehaving, it's a performance thing. They don't do the greatest. And you're like, I am embarrassed. That's taking their successes and failures and turning it into your own success and failure, which is in a performance realm, not healthy. So I really do feel she was pursuing JoJo's legacy at the expense of her husband and son.
His junior year, in the middle of the year, I realized I was missing out on all of his things and he was missing out on all of our things, because that's when we started traveling kind of the world. And then I felt like Tom, as JoJo's dad, was missing out on her things. And
she caused that. That was all thanks to her. It didn't have to be that way, but because she was pursuing this legacy through her daughter, she tore the family apart, quite frankly. And when she's listing out all of the things people were missing, she doesn't even mention missing out on her marriage to Tom. Like, where's Tom in all of this?
okay, I'm thinking to myself, how am I going to tell my husband that we're going to move to LA for 3 months? But I had to commit to that. I had to just say that we would do it and figure it out later. That's what my husband always tells me. He's like, you run into the room and you make a huge mess and then you worry about it later. And that was exactly what I was doing. And I'll tell you, when I told Tom that we were moving, he cried. And JoJo was like, what are we going to do? And I was like, we're going to not talk about it today, but we're going to talk about it tomorrow. We're just going to take a day and we're going to let him be sad and we're going to acknowledge that. And she was cool with that.
You can really see instances more than once of her making decisions without consulting Tom at all. Life-changing decisions. And just being like, we had to do it. I realized this was the decision that needed to be made. And I let Tom know. It's just heartbreaking.
Getting our family back together was important to everyone. And they moved out in January. And as happy as we were, it was kind of an end of an era for us and them too. Because I'm sure they had their bro time like we had our girl time. And
then with this story about everyone wanting to get back together, which again was Tom and her son realizing, if we don't bend to this woman's design. We will never have a family unit. It wasn't everyone getting really on board with the same picture. It was, we have to join with her plan, otherwise there will be no family.
And you know, there wasn't going to be as much time for me to spend with JoJo because I had to spend it with I have to, or I get to spend it, I should definitely say, with everyone else.
So I didn't get to spend all the time I wanted to with JoJo anymore because I had to spend time with the other people. Like, can you imagine the emotional toll that would take hearing those kinds of themes as a son, hearing those kinds of themes as a husband?
And I think Tom selling his chiropractic office and moving out here essentially to be a Instagram buddy and a YouTube filmer, you know, like he didn't really have a purpose. I think that was hard for him. And it just was like a whole, me, perfect Patty. I thought they were just going to move out and everything was going to be fine and tomorrow was going to be a new day. And that wasn't the case. It wasn't easy.
She genuinely did not consider their feelings at all. She had to see it play out in front of her that her decision to do things at their expense was not going to go easily or well at first. I mean, everyone seems happy. I think she likes to imagine everyone is perfectly happy. I highly doubt everyone's perfectly happy. I don't think anyone's perfectly happy, to be honest. And that's why we're gonna get to JoJo eventually, because JoJo has no idea who JoJo is, and she literally said that just recently, so that'll be interesting. And I don't have kids, so I don't want to speak into a realm that I don't know about personally. But I know for a fact, even though a lot of parents don't do this, the marital relationship has to be the strongest one. I think it can sound a little backwards to some parents, like, well, these are my kids, they need my everything. And yes, parents are called to be incredibly self-sacrificial to their kids. But the reality is, if the marriage is not the number one focused upon relationship, it is going to fracture the family, because then all of a sudden the kids become the focus. They kind of become the idols, if you will, of the family. And while that might sound all well and good to have entire focus on your kids, the marriage is designed to be the backbone of the family. And if the backbone's crumbling, there is no real family unit. And that, I think, is exactly what happened. She just pushed her poor husband to the side, did not care about his thoughts on things, his feelings on things, his purpose in all of this. So I kind of wrote a summation, and I don't have the best memorization skills at like 10 p.m. at night. So I'm just gonna read it, but I'm gonna try not to sound like I'm reading it. In summation, I really believe that Jess is deeply insecure about her own identity and is striving tooth and nail to create a reality for her kids that is completely opposite to what she grew up with. Through those efforts, though, her singular focus has become JoJo's legacy. She's been generating, crafting, managing, and even partially usurping JoJo's legacy to strive to become the seen and loved woman she probably always wanted to be since she was a little girl. I know she's really trying to project this happy family image, like, hey, look, everything worked out, but I just don't believe that for a second. And so I really hope she can find some good counseling, the family can find some good counseling, and that healing can slowly take place in the next few years. I'm really hoping that that becomes apparent, that that's the most needed thing right now. It would so benefit her, her marriage, her family, everything. So this video, it might have been a bit harsh at times, but really I just want the best for this family. And right now, not it. So really hoping they can heal in the future.
That documentary, I can't get enough of it. I wish that I would have been on it.
Where do you see yourself and your family in 10 years?
We better have a reality show.